Okay, folks out in the parlor, this is your 1 minute and 30-second warning. All right, Bible class people, it's really seriously time. There's about 7 people in the church. Yeah, somebody needs to go and stir the troops here. Okay, Marcus is going to go be the boy with the stick. That's what you call that. You always need a shepherd. That's the guy that goes out in front. And then you need the boy with the stick. He comes at the back. All right. Well, this is sort of like the Bible, the gospel reading this morning. O Bible class, how I would have gathered you together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wing, but you would not. Oh, well. Anyway, welcome to our Bible class this morning when we're continuing our work through the book of Daniel. We're into Daniel chapter 3, which is best known as the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace. But as we began to discover last week, and I hope we'll continue to discover today, there is a lot more to this story than just 3 men surviving an inferno. There's a lot that comes before, and all of it has important meaning, and I would argue relevance for our life of faith today as we look to God to give us hope in the midst of the hostilities of the world. If you're here in the church, the lesson sheet is partway back on the little TV table there, and you're welcome to grab that. It's the same sheet as we had last week. It's a longer lesson than some others. We didn't get anywhere near through last week. I think we kind of got down the first page and maybe over a little bit onto the second. And if you're joining us online, you're more than welcome to go to the church website, download the lesson sheet there. And also, if you're joining us online and you have questions that you'd like to pose or comments you'd like to make, we very much encourage you to do that also. You can do that simply by sending me an email. I haven't been quite as faithful lately as remembering to check during class, but when we get a little bit of a break or a discussion going here, I will have a look to be sure we're keeping everybody involved in things. All right. A few things that caught my attention this week I thought I'd best share with you. We're in an age where new breakthroughs in medicine are happening faster than we can count. Some of them really beneficial, and some of them, like this, a little dubious. I trust that if you are in the position where they show you an x-ray of a broken something, they can do better than just fix it with Photoshop. Though that'll make you feel a little better, I suppose. All right. There's an announcement in the bulletin this morning about getting a committee together to help oversee and run our annual Vacation Bible School. I'm not sure the theme for VBS is in there, but here it is anyway, just so you can know what we're getting into this year. Yeah, this is actually a preacher from a long time ago. He's passed away now, but he actually wrote a book called Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It's never been made into a Vacation Bible School, but there's this sort of sick side of me that would want to come just for the fire, you know. Anyway, fun-filled week. All right. One of the sure signs of spring is that the realtors are getting going with open houses. There's one, if you've already attended service, happening here that you might want to take in on your way home today. Sunday from 11 to 12:30, this Blue House has an open house. You might want to go there. All right, and then, of course, we got a new prime minister on Friday. The guy who used to sign your money is now the prime minister. And one of his first actions, we know, I think he's made quite a bit of splash about what his main first action was. But one of the lesser known ones was appointing someone new to oversee our fight against fentanyl, which is apparently what we're all supposed to be about right now, according to some people. And there's the new appointment right there. They are. They're very vicious, yes. We have, we're anxiously awaiting in our neighborhood the return of the Catholic geese. Just down the street and around the corner from us is St. Mark's Parish. And every year, 2 geese nest at St. Mark's. And we love them. And our dog really loves them. She thinks they are just the greatest entertainment. And we will even cut through St. Mark's parking lot in the springtime just to get a reaction out of the geese. And our dog, who's normally scared of just about everything, is not scared of these geese. She doesn't bark at them. She doesn't do anything to them. She's actually quite fascinated by them, especially when they come at her with their wings wide out. She thinks that's just the greatest thing on earth, and she walks away like she's seen Jesus, you know. This is her moment. This is her happy time if she can visit with the Catholic geese. The Catholics are becoming less patient with their geese. However, last year they got rid of them a little early. Anyway, all right, into Daniel and the hope amidst hostility that this book gives us. Yes, sir.
Did they baptize them?
I have no, that's what Lutherans do. If we had geese here, we would invite them in Thursday evenings for confirmation class for an hour. And we'd be pretty much certain that by the end of the process, we'd never see them again. Wednesday Lent Supper, too. They could come for that. No, we don't want them at the Lent Supper. They just make a mess of everything, geese. Anyway. What's that? Before supper, yes. Well, that sort of reminds me of seminary. We could always tell. I lived in the dorm and had to eat dorm food, and you could always tell when we were having chicken because the crows and the ravens were very nervous all day long. They just were very edgy. Anyway, all right, into Daniel chapter 3, where we began last time, and this whole image of that Nebuchadnezzar sets up, this golden image that people are to bow down and worship. We talked about this a bit last time. We'll just sort of review very, very quickly and then move forward in the story this morning. We don't know a whole lot about this image. We don't know what it was made of. Well, we know what it was made of. It was made of gold. Was it solid gold or gold plate? Probably gold plate. We know it was 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, which is pretty sizable. And but we don't know what the shape was. Was it in the image of one of the Babylonian gods? Was it in the image of King Nebuchadnezzar himself? We aren't really told that, and that's not really the main point. As Daniel tells the story in chapter 3, he lets us know pretty quick what the intention is, regardless of what the statue looked like. The intention of this construction was to get people thinking about Nebuchadnezzar. And in a certain sense, the oldest idolatry in the book, the idolatry of ourselves. And Daniel kind of milks that idea pretty strongly. He tells us that Nebuchadnezzar made the image, and then 4 times in the following 8 verses, he uses this refrain: the image King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. The image King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So this was his, Daniel sees through this. And he wants us to see through this too. That this is about the worship of the king. This is about the king's importance. And when the time comes, everyone is to fall and worship the image, give homage to the king, more or less. And we also saw last time God's opinion of all of this, which comes across a bit subtly in the story. It never really comes out and says God was angry or anything like that. It's kind of left to you to kind of figure it out in the way that everything is described. And the descriptions border on almost on the ridiculous in terms of the repetition and detail that they go into. A couple of times we're told, for example, that the king sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, the officials of the provinces to come and worship the image. This kind of endless repetition of people is especially when it happens a couple times, is kind of intended to elicit a little chuckle as you read it. And I said last time, you can hardly read these opening verses of chapter 3 without smiling a little bit, particularly if you're reading it out loud, because it is so very wordy, repetitious, verbose, whatever adjective you want to use. And it's not only about the people who are to bow down to this statue, but the actual worship itself. When you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the bagpipe, and every other kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. A couple of times, that listing of the instruments. So chapter 3 begins then with this image being set up, the oldest idolatry, and in a certain sense, God sits in heaven and laughs, has a good chuckle at this event, and in a certain sense, we are to share in that chuckle as well. Except that things aren't very funny in Daniel chapter 3 once the rubber hits the road here. So we'll move forward into the next section. We had just touched on this last time. It raises the question of what we might call public and private faith. Let's just read the section, 856, I'm guessing, 7. I never write this down. Daniel chapter 3, if you want to follow along. $858. Oh, we're making progress. 3 months ago, we were on 856. It's not fast, but we're going forward. All right. Here comes the issue, and things are going to get a bit messy. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, and all the other kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And that whoever does not fall down and worship the image will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up." We might be laughing at the image, but the Babylonians are not, and neither are they taking lightly the stubbornness of these three servants of the Lord who are also servants of Babylon. It's important here, I think, in setting this up, to pause and ponder exactly what this statue was and what it wasn't. Nowhere do we read in this account that the worship of the God of Israel was forbidden. King Nebuchadnezzar never says, "You shall not worship any other god." And in a certain sense, he cannot say that because the Babylonian system of deities had many, many gods in it. And they were not, the big term is monotheists, that, people who see one God. No, they had lots of gods. Every home had little idols in it, probably. And they had the whole range of gods of this and gods of that, everything from soup to nuts, so to speak. And Nebuchadnezzar is not outlawing any of that. And he's not outlawing the worship of the God of Israel, necessarily. I suspect that the God of Israel isn't, he's aware of the God of Israel because Daniel has interpreted the dream. He's said a few nice things, but I'm pretty certain that he views the God of Israel as being one of these many, many, many gods. So he's not outlawing anything here. But what he is doing is saying that when you're in public, when you're out in the world, the thing you must worship is the golden image. What you do in your home is your business. Can't control that. Doesn't appear to want to control that at this point. He will get that way later in the story. But at this point, he doesn't appear to want to do that. It's not his big issue. What you do in your own home is your business. But when you're out in public and the music plays, you are to bow down to the statue. And what he's trying to do here, and Babylon was a cosmopolitan city. People were there from many, many, many different cultures. It was, in a certain sense, like Toronto, New York, or any other, what they sometimes call world city, where people are there from all kinds of backgrounds, all sorts of different belief systems and ideas and things like that. And the goal that Nebuchadnezzar has, in our terms, is to assimilate people into the Babylonian culture as your own personal faith is privatized and you're made to adhere to the public value, which in this case is the statue, where you find yourself. And I think this is very much a problem or an issue that we need to face, that we are facing in the world today. Nobody cares, particularly, what you believe in your own home. You can be Christian, you can be Jewish, you can be Muslim, you can be Hindu, you can be atheist. You can be whatever you want to be, whatever you are, whatever is right to you. But increasingly in Canada and in other countries, there is a kind of public values that everyone is to uphold. And in public, these are the things you need to say or do or be aware of. So I did a little research. What are Canadian values? AI was somewhat helpful in all of this. I didn't have to read all kinds of long papers. And was fairly able to compile a pretty quick list of things that we in Canada value, that are the public values of our country. Things like democracy. Everybody over the age of 18 or 19, wherever you are or whatever, has the right to vote, and the will of the majority prevails, but the minority is also respected. This is our system of governance, where democracy is at the very center of the whole thing. We also value diversity and inclusion. Not everybody has, when I was going through university, and we were, these are old terms now, but I studied political science and Canadian history as my undergraduate degree. It hasn't really done me a lot of good in the ministry, but it's an interesting area to study. And, we learned that, Canadians value the mosaic, the cultural mosaic. That was the term that was used way back when, where people are able to bring their faith, their background, and all of these other things, and together, it's diverse, but we don't exclude anybody. Unlike the U.S. experience, which we often was described as more of a melting pot, where everybody was kind of mushed into one, and diversity wasn't quite as cherished as it is up here. Now, I know these terms have grown in their meaning to include a lot of other things besides different cultures. We now, different forms of sexual expression and these kind of things are all included in these things, and it very quickly has become a very loaded term. But it's a term that, I don't have to deal with it on a daily basis here, but I know many of you in your workplaces very much have to. This is the way we do business. We value diversity and inclusion, whatever that means in that particular context. Equality and equity. that everybody's equal. Nobody has more value or rights than anybody else, and that we need to be fair in how we distribute things. These things all kind of run together. Fairness is the next one. And this is also a public value. What's interesting is that over the last 10 or 15 years, when you get to this, to fairness, there's sort of a new doctrine that's emerged that those who have, been perceived to be the recipients of good for a long time, perhaps now as a measure of fairness, should be excluded from receiving some of the good, and others elevated. It's kind of, again, on the surface, it's not a bad idea. When I teach confirmation class, if one of the young people that rarely gets a question right, or maybe is rarely paying attention, finally does and gets a question right, I'm going to celebrate that a little bit more verbally than I might the one who's very studious and is always getting the questions right, because I want to encourage that one to feel like they belong. On the surface, it's not a bad thing. We do this in our homes too. When I'll name names because some of the kids. Jonathan's very musical. We celebrated his music. Rebecca and Aaron aren't nearly as musical. So when we went to a music festival, Jonathan would routinely win his class. That was sort of a foregone going in. If one of the other two even got like an honorable mention, we were going for ice cream, because you want to encourage them. You want to do that. And it's trying to be fair to everybody. Not that we didn't go for enough ice cream with Jonathan too, but you know what I'm saying. On the surface, it's not a bad idea, but it becomes very odd as it gets put on society as a whole. And then another thing we're very, very conscious of in Canada is the environment. And more and more, the decisions that governments make are having to be filtered through. What does this do to the environment? What are the long-term consequences? And we've seen various decisions made in the history of our country, in the recent history of our country, that are primarily based on a kind of an environmental perspective on things. All right, that's what I found. This would be a good time for you to tell me. You're, as I say, much more out there in the everyday work world than I am privileged to be. Is this realistic? Is this the stuff that are kind of the public values today? Are there more things that, or some of these not necessarily values? Comments, questions, observations? Kier. Yes. Yes. That word doesn't mean what it used to mean. No, absolutely it doesn't. No, that's right. The meanings have changed. And as I say, I'm not as much in the workplace. I was trying to give a very basic, here's the, what we used to understand these words to mean. You guys are much more out there in the world where you see how these words are used differently, and the strength of things. Brian, I saw your hand, and then I saw Arnold's hand.
It comes to mind, I guess, free speech, which is also comes into conflict with some of the other things.
Yeah, let's just put that one on here so we don't forget it. But yeah, in Canadian society, we talk about valuing free speech. But as you say, that comes into, will set you up in direct conflict with some of these sorts of other values that we have. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Arnold. Right.
But one of the challenges that you run into with this is definitions, right? So, these are all pleasant sort of things, and then when you get down to the practical level, what does it actually mean? Like in our country, or in our company, we probably got 50 nationalities represented. We're about as diverse as you could get when you look at diversity using that definition.
Right.
But there's other definitions of diversity that maybe don't fall in, and things that we don't necessarily enumerate.
Right.
So it does make it very challenging when you're going through this.
Yeah.
One thing that struck me too about this is, this is kind of like a common understanding that you get to. And so, what's the underpinning of it? Well, it comes down to this common understanding as opposed to go back a long way and say values were based on the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, God gave us the order for how to run things. And so, even with any of these things, you can still put them up against the Ten Commandments and say, okay, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder. Learn the confirmation of this means a whole bunch more that of how we are to live our lives, right? And it all kind of fits together. Thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor, right? Well, a lot of this stuff actually falls into that as well.
Yep.
So when I look at it, I think, okay, this is great, and you can try and detach it from the original Judeo-Christian basis of it, but it still pretty much comes back to that.
Right. Yeah, I think you're accurate in what you're saying is that up until maybe 25 years ago, we tended to, and certainly the definitions that I gave, the base definitions of these words that we lived with for a long time, pretty much fell in line with the Judeo-Christian understanding of the world. That of course, God is inclusive, and we're to be fair with other people and treat other people equally. God created this world and He made us the stewards of this world, so we need to be aware of the environment. But as you and Keir have correctly pointed out, I think these terms have kind of been hijacked a little bit by the world and have now become a somewhat different confession than we have traditionally associated with these words. Keir, did you have your, yeah?
Yeah, so there's one thing that's missing here, and everybody's going to recognize it, and everybody's recognize its sort of its inherent initial falsity, but also what it's been hijacked to, is that the whole idea of Canadian values, at least from an international perspective, is politeness.
Oh yes, we're unfailingly polite, yes.
Yeah, of course we are. You can go to a hockey game, you'll see that. But it's been hijacked to now call it the public sin is thou shalt not offend
Right.
somebody.
Yes. Yes.
Right? And so, as a Christian, that becomes a bit problematic.
Right.
Because
Yes.
your worldview, the fact that your faith is there, people for some reason find offensive.
Yes.
Just being.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But they do not offend somebody.
Yes.
Now the public value system, gosh help you.
Yes. 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 Absolutely. Arnold again.
Just one supplemental there. So you talk about the last 25 years. I think it wasn't quite 25 years ago, but at the time after 9/11, there was this service that took place in memory of the victims and that.
Yeah.
And that was the first time where the edict came down from government that thou shalt not invoke the name of Jesus.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yes.
25 years ago.
Yep.
And now our chaplains, our LCC chaplains in the Army or in the armed forces are basically being told, yeah, you can be a chaplain, but try and leave the God stuff out of it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly it. Yeah. No. This is. I think in Canada, the moment where we crossed that bridge, if I recall correctly, was when the Swiss airplane went down off of Peggy's Cove. And there was a memorial service there for the victims of the crash. And I remember, I obviously was not involved, but I was involved in synod work and that sort of thing, and remember quite clearly, the edict being given that no prayer should be offered in the name of Jesus. Yeah, and you see this water, we've started, beginning around the turn of the millennium, this walking away from the traditional and historic understandings of these terms for different understandings. I was very, very fortunate in back in my last parish. I was able to, for 5 years straight, lead the city's Remembrance Day service. And when I was asked to do it, I wanted to know right away how long my leash was. What could I say and what could I not say? I was very, very, very fortunate that the Legion people who asked me to lead this wanted this to be full-bore Christian. And so I could say what I wanted to say. And because of that, I could happily lead this civic service and have a little bit of fun with them too, because they had never asked the Germans before to lead the Remembrance Day service. I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm not kidding about that. They had never asked us before, but we kind of had fun together, a good time. Good 5 years. I look back on those services with great fondness. All right. Yeah, so a lot of public values today. And then where does this lead? I stumbled across a very interesting book that I hoped to have read, marked, and inwardly digested for you this morning, but as my voice sounds a bit like I've been battling other things in my head this week, I joke that Wednesday Lent service said I have one more thing in common with the Pope this week, whose medical updates we've been getting somewhat regularly and somewhat more information than needed. I've had copious mucosal secretions. Anyway, it sort of left me a little bit not so excited to read too much, but I came across this wonderful book that I am digging into and will continue to dig into in the days ahead. It's not a particularly long book, only about 125 pages, and it's simply called The Secular Creed. And the author of this book is a woman named Rebecca McLaughlin, who has a PhD in theology from Cambridge, and who, as you read into the book a little bit, she confesses that she is same-sex attracted. However, she lives in a happy marriage with her husband and 2 children. And from that perspective, she writes very compellingly and from a very, very scriptural and wise basis on what really she identifies, and I think one could quibble about what all should be in here, about this sentence or language that sometimes appears on signs. I think I've seen a couple of these around town over the years. I confess I try to look more at the road than at the signs on the side of the road. But the little lawn signs say, Black Lives Matter, love is love, gay rights are human rights, women's rights, or gay rights are civil rights, human rights are women's rights, and transgender women are women. And, that is, in many ways, the public faith, if you will, the public creed that we are to, that is very much at play in our society today. And what she does in the book, and as I said, I haven't gotten far enough into it to mine out everything that she has to say, is she takes each of these and she's able to say, yes, okay, there's a positive in many of these, not all of them, a positive thing being stated here. But on the other hand, when you load it up the way it's loaded up, it's actually very contrary to what we as Christians believe. And that the goal of this sort of stuff is very much like the goal of Nebuchadnezzar's statue, which is to say, well, you can believe what you want when you're in your own home, that's fine. But you step out into public, this is what a lot of the world wants you to believe. And like I say, she takes each one and goes through what it means to those who confess it, and then looks at it from a scriptural point of view and says, what's wrong with this? I've only gotten through a couple of these, and maybe by next week I'll have gotten through, well, I hope by next week to have digested or at least read the whole book. She goes through, I read her discussion of this line, Black Lives Matter. Now, the good of that, of course, is that nobody, one of our Judeo-Christian values, something that we in the church would wholeheartedly agree with, is that no one should be discriminated against on the basis of their race. Black, white, Asian, doesn't matter. Nobody should be discriminated against. Then she also goes into the fact that the church has sinned in this regard in certain places at certain times in its history. It has marginalized or accepted ideas that were not scriptural. And that needs to be repented of. That needs to be admitted and move on. But then she goes into a little more about how, okay, but that doesn't mean that one race now, overcomes all the others. And in a very healthy way. As I said, I haven't had time to dig into everything here. Another one that I've just scratched the surface on is love, which is, again, a very common phrase today. You'll hear it all the time. Scripturally, what's wrong with that sentence? Anybody want to take a guess? Yeah. Where she goes with this that I just was completely intrigued by, she goes, God is love. Love is not love. God is love. So love has an origin in God, and love needs to be understood in that perspective, that this is from God, and that because God is love, God defines love for us. Anyway, we can, I see hands everywhere. Claude's about to jump off the balcony if I don't answer him soon. Don't do that, Claude.
No, don't do that.
Okay. Yeah.
I think some of the problems
Oh,
with
shoot.
the word love is the English language.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at
Sorry.
the Greek, there are 4 different meanings for love that are translated into English, the word love. And in English, you can say everything. Like, my wife loves ice cream. But what the heck is that? Like, so we have a world that will say almost everything is love.
Yes.
However different shades they are, and so the definition of love in an English sense is fairly lame or weak.
Yeah.
It's too inclusive
Well, yeah, it's on one level so innocuous that you would hardly wonder, but then when you really kind of unpack it, yeah, and you're absolutely right that English is a little bit limiting when you come to describing love. Absolutely correct. Greek has 4 at least different words for love, each with a slightly different meaning. And you get a better sense of what the context is, sort of like the Inuit have, like 70 kinds of snow or something like this. We just have snow, wet snow, dry snow, dirty snow, yellow snow, those kind of things. Tim, were you going to ask a question? You've been sort of at the back, and sometimes when you are, you're going to say something, and sometimes you're just coming to hear better.
Love has been used as a way to equivalent homosexual with heterosexual
Yes.
attraction.
Yep.
And a number of the things on your previous slide was really about shimming LGBT as a normalized type of relationship into mainstream society. That's the basic objective of those.
For sure. Yeah, no, exactly. This has all gotten loaded with a lot of very dramatic freight in the last few years. Yeah. Did I see another hand? There was it looked like a group of them up there. All right. We only have a couple minutes left, anyway, so maybe where we'll start next time, and I'll just skip ahead to the next slide just to kind of close things out a little bit here, is hopefully I'll have read the book a little more. I can talk a little bit more about what McLaughlin has to say. Her chapter on love is love, given what I told you about her earlier, that she struggles with same-sex attraction, is actually a very powerful chapter, because she writes as somebody who knows what she's talking about here. I couldn't write a chapter like that in a book, because I have a number of besetting sins. That is not one of them. All right. There are dangers when faith gets privatized. And we'll come back to this next time, but we'll just sort of introduce it, and maybe you can think about this over the next week as well. When we allow faith to become, it's what you do in your own home, and don't bring it out into the public square, things start to change. Churches tend to be much more focused on spiritual and psychological health. Now, I mean, we're all here for spiritual health. That's fine. But we see in a lot of churches, as faith is kind of pulled back out of the public square, a lot more emphasis on what could just really be called psychology. Maybe with a few Bible verses thrown in, or some biblical example that might trigger some thinking about psychology. We become very inward focused rather than outward focused on the Great Commission, because we're not too eager to go out into the public square and do what Jesus has told us to do. People also tend to disconnect their faith from activities that connect them to their neighbors. We kind of withdraw, associate with like-minded people, but not with our neighbors around us who might not share our faith at all. Although I almost had an interaction last night with Muhammad, my Muslim neighbor. I thought he had lit his house on fire for a while. It was getting near sunset, and they, of course, can eat after sunset, and he had decided to get the smoker going for the first time of the year. And Susan was sitting, and she says, I think the neighbor's house is on fire. I mean, there was like billows of smoke coming from Muhammad's place, and I was like, what the heck? As I went out there, and I could smell the meat, and I went, he's just getting ready for sunset. It's okay. But but other than that, I mean, I'll be quite honest, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I don't have a lot to do with Muhammad. He doesn't have a lot to do with me either. But he views the world very differently than I do, and we tend to kind of withdraw. The other thing we tend to do in the world is look to the government to solve our social problems. The government should have a solution for this. Well, the government has solutions. We maybe don't like their solutions, but they have some solutions. And the bottom line is that faith becomes little more than a leisure activity. It's sort of something that we do, but it gets pushed more to the side, even in our own lives, if we're working, if we're trying to embrace the public confession, or forced to embrace the public confession anyway. All right, we do have to leave it there. The praise singers need to get things set up for the second service. So we'll come back and pick this up next time. If there's thoughts that you have, as I say, I'll try to share a little bit more out of the Secular Creed book, and have a little bit more to share with you that way. I think this is a very, I don't know, is this an important conversation? Okay, all right. Okay, I mean, I don't want to be boring you either. I mean, I could go on about stuff for a long time, but I think it's important that we address these things too. Let's close in a quick prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have called us to be your children. Help us to faithfully live as your children, not just in our homes, but out in the world also. And where things would pull us away from you, pour out your Spirit upon us to keep our faith strong and keep us connected and united to you and bold in our confession. We pray, Lord, that you would also fill us with love for others who do not agree with us and may never agree with us, and give us the grace to love them and to witness in winsome ways to them. Bless and be with us now as we prepare to worship you, or if we're on our way for the day, give us safe journeys, and bless us always as your dear children in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Blessings, everybody.